Good day, everyone, and welcome to our today's webinar. Today, we're going to be looking at the custom field builder that's present throughout Air Maestro, and I'm going to be taking you through it item by item and show you how to use it. So I think for today, we're going to be doing it through the Forms tab, which I'm going to access by clicking on Setup. Form tab setup. And I've previously created a tab for us to use. So I'm just going to select that over here. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to take you through each field that you can add to a form or anywhere where the custom field builder is in use. I'll talk a little bit about the function of it and what it can be used for. So first of all, wherever you see something like this, custom fields in a preview, that is a custom field builder. If you have the requisite permissions, then you will be able to customize whatever part of the site this applies to. So I'm going to go click Add New Field. When you click that, you'll get to this screen, and this allows you to select a control type, so what you want to add. A control tooltip on the right-hand side, which we'll look at in just a moment, a control name, and a control label. So the difference between the control name and the control label is that the name is what the system will see. So if you wish to draw a global report later on that looks at this information, the information that's being recorded in these custom fields, you will be able to see the control name. The control label is what is displayed to a user when they are actually filling in these fields. They do not necessarily have to be the same thing. You can, I recommend that you use the control name to differentiate this from other similar ones. So let's say we want to put in a vehicle registration as a text field. In that case, I would call this the custom field training vehicle registration. And this one I would just call vehicle registration. So this is what you will see when you draw that global report. This is what you will see when you fill in the field. All right. The next one down here is the width override. So that's the width of the control label in pixels. If it is too narrow to fit this label, it will wrap over 2 lines, and we'll have a look at that in just a moment. Then we have border, which gives you a border around the field, and display label. That allows you to hide or show what's in this box here. So to begin with, I actually want to start with a group rather than going from the top of the list. And a group is a control type that is used to organize any custom fields that are inside it. So when I started this this form tab, I've actually already created a group here called page. And I've done this to help me organize everything that is below it. So the basics say that this is displayed as a flow or as a table. Tables are rigid columns, whereas flow will arrange itself to fit. Direction, the fields are going horizontally. So if I have 2 columns, the first field that I add will be here, second field will be here, third here, fourth here, etc. But we'll look at that in more detail shortly. I'm going to leave that as 1 column for now. Label width, the default width of the labels that are within this group. I'll leave it at 200 because you can override that per label or per subgroup. Group width, how wide the page is in this case in pixels, and whether it's aligned left or right. Display options is some more advanced functionality, which we'll come to later. You'll note that I have display label unticked, which means that this is basically an invisible group. It's purely for the functionality of organizing. So let's go and add a new one. I'll say 2-column group. I'm going to put in 2 columns here. We'll leave these as is for now. And we'll make the group width 500 pixels. Okay, so we have some restrictions on the control name, where it has to begin with a letter. So in this case, I'll just delete that. So you'll note that our label is displayed rather than the field name, and our tooltip is shown here. If I edit that again, you can add conditional formatting, I beg your pardon, HTML formatting to this control label. What I mean by that is things like bold, italic, underline text, colors, etc. And I think the easiest way to do that is to put in some text in the tip here. So, and let's say I want to make this bold, underlined, and I want to make it red. So it looks really ugly. Let's maybe make that a lighter color. That's still pretty ugly, but it'll do. So we're in design. We can go to HTML, which will give us all of the code that we need. I can copy that, paste it in there, and you'll see that's now updated. By default, group text is in blue. If you want to change that, you can come over here and let's make that black, which adds in some more code for us. And you'll see that's now black. So that's great. The other option we have is to create a border. And I'm just going to remove all of this. And if I tick border, it will change the font type here again and give us a nice outline. All right, so let's go inside that. And I'm going to click Add New Field. We're going to look at some of the other groups available, options available. Auto number. So this is an automatic system which goes up by 1 number for each instance of a page that you create. I've actually given us an example already, but we'll come to that shortly. So control name, auto number will do. Width override. So I can try and make that, let's say, 30 pixels wide. Start number at 4. Pad this number to 5 places, which means that I'll get 0, 0, 0, 0, 4 for the first one because that's my starting. I can change that to 1, and number prefix will make it the first form, CF 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. You'll note that this is wider than 30 pixels, and that is because it doesn't wrap a single word. Whereas if I put this there, you'll note that that's wrapped. This is overriding the group width that we have set here. So here's our 2-column group. We have a default label width of 200 pixels. But this particular auto number, we've chosen to override to 30. So if I remove that, this is now 200 pixels, which is from here to the beginning of the field. So I mentioned I had an example of that already, and I've done that in the flight records, which are built entirely with these custom fields. Let's have a look at this one. So here's our record reference. You'll note that it's blank at the moment. This only updates when the form is edited rather than than it being viewed. So I'm editing this flight record. I'll just update that. And there we go, flight record 0004. So no inputs required from me for the auto number field. Let's add a new field. We have a calculated field. And what this does is it looks at other custom fields that you've defined and can do a calculation with them in the formula down below. Again, this requires other fields, so I'm going to go and look at an existing example in our flight records. And I've got some of these examples up here. And also down here, which I think is probably the easier one to look at. So let's go to our fuel and oil group. In case I've not mentioned it, this hierarchy is looking at all of the groups that are in this area, in this case in our flight legs. So we have route, which is the very bottom level. In route, we have page, which we've used to configure how all of the other groups are laid out. And then I have a page is 2 columns. In column 2, I have these 2 groups. And in column 1, I just have task and time total. So that's how I've laid it out. Let's go and look at fuel and oil. And we have here a calculated field for fuel burn. Numeric fields for landing and takeoff and landing fuel, which we'll look at later. But as a brief summary, I've said that for this formula, we're going to be using takeoff and landing fuel. Takeoff is A, landing fuel is B. And to get our fuel burn, we subtract our landing fuel from our takeoff fuel. So our formula is A minus B. Our expected result type is a number or a text or a date and time. And we're keeping it to 1 decimal place of precision. We do have quite a few different options when it comes to formulas, such as here. And it's actually much the same as you would do in Excel. So if you're familiar with Excel operators, then you can use this quite easily. All right, so I'll add a calculated field in a little bit later, and we'll look through that in more detail. If I add a new one, we have a checkbox. This is a simple yes or no question. Default value is either ticked or not, and read only means you can only see this, you cannot make changes to it. I'm not sure why you'd want that, unless you're using this update rules, which would say this field is ticked if this field is, let's look for an easier one. If it were an inter-hospital thing. So what that means is we have a different custom tab with the HEMS operates a specific things. So patient assessment, mission details, basically. And in a mission debrief or mission brief, you could have fields that look at the other tabs and say, this is an operation of this type, and the tick box is gets ticked when that mission brief is done. And then you would have it a read only, so that tick box is only checked when certain conditions are met in other tabs. So there's quite a lot you can do with that. It's really the specifics are too specific to talk about in a generalized training such as this. but there's a great deal of potential there. Then we have a checkbox list. A required field tick box, which means it must be filled out. And then we have the different things we can do here. So bases, we'll actually go and look at our locations register, look at all of the bases and present them as options for us, like so. Departments does exactly the same thing, like so. Aircraft, and let's put it in 2 columns this time. And reference from existing fields means you can just look at a different checkbox list. So the one we're going to be looking at most is custom, and this allows you to define your own checkboxes. So let's put in a couple of basic examples. And then we have this interesting one here that says allow custom text. Update that. And allow custom text is mainly when you're referring to an existing field, because this is something that is possible in drop-down lists. You'll note that it does not apply. Oops, if I open that again, it does not apply to things like custom definitions because this is limited for you. One thing that you can do is right-click and set it something to default, which means by default it will be ticked. Then we have a contact picker. Now this may not work in our preview here. We may need to go live. And I can insert that. And this will give us the ability to go and look at contacts from your personnel register, either as profiles or actual contacts. So one thing to note is that this is actually outside the borders of the box, because with our label width plus the size of the field, it's wider than the column group was allowed to be. It's 500 pixels. So there are 2 ways of going about fixing that. The first is we could expand the width of the group, or we could try to bring down the width of the labels, like so. So you'll see that there's less space between the label and the actual field itself. In this case, to make it look nice, we probably need to expand this to about 650 pixels. Provided, of course, that the groups above it, in this case page, will allow that. So let's make that 900. Anyway, so you'll note that these are being organized into 2 columns: auto number field, checkbox, checkbox list, and contact picker. It doesn't look particularly tidy because it is in flow. So if I change that to table, it will give me more rigid columns and they will be better organized. I can also choose to make it vertical, which means that we have our auto number and checkbox are here and here. And you'll note those are the first 2 fields in my list under the group. And if I change it to horizontal, auto number and checkbox are here and here. You can reorder these by either using the up and down arrows on the left-hand side or by dragging and dropping. In this case, I'm going to make this a bit tidier by going for a cumulative time field. This is essentially just a way of calculating a cumulative value to make it required or read-only. And this field actually has quite an interesting property in the flight record setup, where you can make it display the aircraft total time in service. So if I come here to my daily totals group, I have TTIS, which as you can see is cumulative time. And if you add this type of field in the flight records, you can say default to current total time in service of selected aircraft and make it read-only, which means that the person submitting it can't make a change there. So to see that in action, we'll go to our operations, our flight records, open up this charter here. And there's our total time in service, which did not need to be added by the pilots. All right, let me put something in. Let's put a date control in. We have a default value, so a default date, show now button, and auto populate with current date. And let's move that to the bottom, and suddenly everything is much tidier. So here's our date control. It has automatically populated with the date of this webinar. However, if I were to select a different date, I could come back and click the now button, which gives me the current date again. Required field and read only. As before, required fields means it must be filled out. Read only means it cannot be changed, but you could change it using the update rules. So for example, if you want to see when a form is actually started, you could say auto populate with current date, read only, and the system will automatically populate that for you. And you won't be able to change it. All right, I'm going to give the two columns a rest and go back to our page and start adding things here. So the next one is date time. This works in very much the same way as the date control does, but you can specify the actual time of day as well. So let's put that in. And it'll give me date and time when I click the now button, or you can select it from picker. Note that this does not restrict you to the actual hour. You can type in your own time there as well. All right, date time drop-down list, one of the most useful ones. We have some examples here where you can select the type of flight, and this comes with some conditional formatting, which we'll look at in just a moment. But for this example, we can say option 1, add that, option 2, click add, option 3, and add. As in the checkbox list, you can automatically populate it with bases, departments, aircraft, or reference from an existing field. You can allow custom text, which we saw previously, and I'll look at that in more detail now. And you can set the drop-down width. So let's say I want this to be really wide for some reason. That is now 200 pixels wide. I can come back and change that. And let's say I want it to be 500. It's now 500 wide. The allow custom text actually lets you add new options as you go. Again, that may need us to go into the live build, which we will do so. So, next one. is our group, which we've already looked at. It's a way of organizing organizing other fields, and groups are actually useful for another reason, mainly display options. So groups can also be used, for example, as an invisible group when it comes to conditional formatting. And I've put a brief example in this page here. So you should be familiar with this blue text, meaning it's a group with no border. I have here number of aircraft required and a drop-down list. So here's our drop-down list. Here's our drop-down list of number of aircraft required and drop-down list for aircraft 1, 2, and 3. If I edit these fields, I have down here display options, and I'm saying that aircraft 1, this drop-down list, should only appear when the number of aircraft required is 1 or greater. So this here is condition A. I have a formula here to define how my conditions affect each other. So I could say I have in resources required, I can add something that says let's make it a radio button. And a radio button list is very much set up very much like a checkbox list, or a drop-down list rather, but you can only select one option. So I'm going to make this ground and air, insert that, and we have here our two options. So once I've done that, I can say I only want this aircraft to show at all when it is an air charter. So I'll go to display options for this whole group for aircraft. I'll add a condition and say search for that charter field, ground or air charter, and this should only display when air charter is ticked. Again, those formulas are exactly the same as Excel formulas, so you can put and if functions in. Let's go and have a look at how that actually works in practice. So in the preview down there, in the custom field builder, your fields will show regardless of conditional formatting. So if it still shows there, don't worry, it's just not in effect. So let's go and create a new custom field training form, which I've set up for the purposes of this webinar. Here's our charter request form. As you can see, that aircraft field is not showing. However, if I click air, I then get number of aircraft required, and I can say 1, which gives me a single list, or 2, or 3. So in this example, I would not want to allow custom text for this drop-down list, because I've only defined a maximum of 3 aircraft drop-down lists down here. So if someone put in 4, that wouldn't mean anything because I haven't created a 4th option in the form type setup. So let's go back, have a look here, and let's go back to our custom fields. Again, we can navigate using the hierarchy here. So column group will take me into this box here, but I actually just want to continue adding down here at the bottom of the page. The next we have is a label, which is a simple text field. And I'll put in label. And that will just show up here. So that can be used to create instructions for your crew. It also supports the same HTML text that the group titles do, or any label does actually. So this here is text for bold, and there we go. This can also be used to create line breaks. So if you want to space out your fields a bit to make it more visually appealing, we can add a new field, create a label. This will be label. Actually, I'm just going to show you this quickly. You cannot create two control names, two custom fields with the same control name. If I try and insert this, it'll tell me that this control name is in use by another field. So these control names always have to be unique because they're what the system uses to differentiate one from another. So I'll just call that label 2. That there is HTML for a line break. And if I then go to our next type, our next type of custom field, which is a location, you will note that there is a break here. So location is like you see in the flight records when you put in to and from. It looks at that same background database. A nested drop-down list. I'll show you this. Is basically a way to put in effectively conditional formatting, but in a single control. So let's say you want to do it this way. We're going to add an option to level 1 that says charter. And training. So our level 1 label is type of flight, charter or training. I can click on training, which will then allow me to add sub options. So private, and ATO, and let's say in-house. Then if I click on charter, these will disappear because they're only available once you've selected training. So let's say cargo and packs. Let's remove that label as well. So label width defines these labels up here as opposed to this width defining this label. Our drop-down list width, how wide these drop-down lists will be. List direction is vertical or horizontal. Let's do horizontal for now. And if I insert that, we have our level 1 item, which then allows us to select a level 2 item. If I change that to vertical, then those drop-down lists will be one above the other, like so. All right. Next up, we have a numeric field. So this is basically just a number. Let's say number of No, let's make it weight of packs kg. Now this is not going to work because you cannot have special characters such as brackets in your control name. You can only have it in a control label, and it's warning me as such there. So in this case, what I would do is I would remove the brackets from the control name and just re-add them to the control label here, which will be absolutely fine. Precision, how many decimal places you want to keep it to, are a valid range. So in what range of numbers can this be entered? So we can't have a weight of less than 0, and we can't carry more than 400 kilos, for example. A default value, so what it will automatically be populated with, width, and then required field and read only. So here's our weight of packs, our numeric field, and I'm going to put in another one, another numeric field called weight of cargo. In this case, I'll keep it to 1 decimal place, but I will not put in a default value. And there it is down there. So I said we'd come back to calculated fields, and now we're going to do that. I'll go add a calculated field. We are going to look for our weights. Here's weight of cargo. You'll note that this is prefixed by the custom tab name. And to get our totals, we just want to go A plus B. It's going to be a number, and I want it to 1 decimal place. So I've got plus sign in there where I cannot use it. And there we go. Note that your calculated fields will not work in the preview down here. These are actually done when that tab is saved. So we'll fill out one of these forms, and we'll see how all of these work. Next, we have a personnel picker, which functions much like the contact picker does, but it's focused on personnel from the site. So we can choose to allow selection of more than 1 person. An example of where you might use this is for a hazard report. You could ask the reporter who they think ought to be responsible for addressing this hazard. We can organize it by department, by base and department, by base and by name. So I'll show you how these work. Let's do base department first. You can filter which bases or departments are available. So let's say this is only going to be from the operations staff, but from any base. Again, this is not going to work in the preview, so we will come to it. Let's see if it's here. Here's our personnel picker. And you'll note that we have got it organized by base and department. And it is being presented to us by base and then by department. It's only showing operations because we have put in a filter saying we only want to look at that department. So if I were to say, do it by base, it's fine. And I only want to look at these bases. I can then come here and refresh. And we only have one person in operations at the bases specified, so I can only select him. All right. Next, we can say, oh, I beg your pardon. One more thing about the personnel picker is this multiple personnel selection option. If I update that, then this personnel picker will actually change into a checkbox list, which allows me to select more than one person in it. So one option where we use it in-house is for attendees of meetings. All right, I'll add a new field. Radio button list we've looked at briefly, but I'll go through it in a little bit more detail. Again, we can have it select bases, departments, aircraft, custom, or reference from an existing field. If I add radio 1 and radio 2, let's put in 3 and 4 as well. Again, we have the option to choose the number of columns and the direction, horizontal or vertical. So if I put in 2 columns and a horizontal flow, it'll show radio 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I change that to vertical, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, this allows a selection of only one thing. So for example, one place where it has been used recently was the classification of bird or animal strikes. Obviously, you can only classify it as one thing, one level of severity. So that's an ideal place to use a radio button. Schedule task type, this is unique to forms, which is one of the reasons why I decided to do this in forms. This is new in version 3.3, which has only recently been released, and it allows you to select from the scheduled task types available in your scheduler. The reason you might want to do this is for something like a charter request. You can you can select what type of task it is, and then if you choose to use the new forms dashboard to create a scheduled task from that form, it will automatically populate the scheduled task type in the scheduler with what you've selected in the form. So it's basically just a way of saving a little bit of time for you. All right, text is plain text entry. I have a few options. Multi-line text box allows text to be entered over multiple lines. Enforce uppercase and enforce unique. Enforce uppercase means everything will be automatically capitalized. Enforce unique means it can't be the same as any other of this instance of the text box. Default value, again, will populate the field with whatever you like as per this numeric one. Width and height. Height only applies when it is a multi-line text box, otherwise it will be ignored. Width specifies how wide the text box is to determine how much space the person has to enter that text. So here's our 200 by 50. And you can see that's automatically capitalized, and I can type it over multiple lines. Whereas if I go and remove multi-line text box, then it is a single line available for me. So when it comes to things like safety reports, I would recommend avoiding text boxes purely because it makes it more difficult for you to get your statistics out. So if you can use a drop-down list or a radio button list or a checkbox, it's much easier to get your statistics using those in global reporting than it is to get a text box. So here's a time field, which works the same way as the date and time ones do, but without the date. You can choose whether you want the time picker or not, whether you want the now button, and what the default value is. So here's our time picker, here's now, and that's all there is to that. Tree works much like a nested drop-down list, actually. You may be familiar with it from other parts of the site, such as the safety report categories. We can right-click to add an item. Let's call it level 1. You can right-click to add an item under that. Option 1. I'll right-click again on level 1 and put in option 2, because if I were to right-click on option 1, it would then put that as another option under that. So let's put in level 2 by right-clicking on top level, and that shows up down here. Again, we have required and read-only and display options as always, and that shows up like this. So if you need people to select multiple things instead of just one option under a nested drop-down list, then a tree would probably be preferable. And then finally, we have our upload field. This allows you to upload files to your form, report, profile, or whatever, and it shows up like this. You can select a file from your computer. I'll choose this one. I'll give you an upload field like that. I can't upload it here because this is just a preview. So now that we have all of those, let me refresh this. We'll make it air. I need one aircraft. It's going to be this one. Go to our next tab. Here we have our contact picker. You can search using the first and last name and add in text yourself. Our date and time is here. Our drop-down list, location, nested drop-downs. We have our weight calculation here. You'll note that this calculated field will not update until we progress past this tab, which in effect saves all the information we've entered. Text, date, time, our uploads, like so. You'll note that this turns green when it's ready, when it's actually been uploaded to the server. So once I click Next tab, that should all be saved. And you'll see that things like our cargo and pax weight has been calculated. And we can submit that. So that's a basic grounding in the fields available and what they do and how to add them. I'm going to take you on a brief whistle-stop tour of where on the site you can use them. So first up, under Setup, under Personnel. At the very bottom here, we have Personnel Details. And this can be used to add things to a personnel details page. So let's say we want to add a drop-down list for eye color for the purposes of visas. Blue, hazel, and green. Once you've added that, then in each person's details page, and this applies to everyone on the site, you will have a drop-down list here. So let's edit this page. And you can record additional details for your own purposes. Right, next up we have our flight record setup, which we've looked at previously. This is all built using these custom fields. You can make any changes you like. You can put in calculated fields such as the difference between your off-block and on-block time, being your block time down here. Those do require slightly more complicated formulas, which we are happy to help you with. Like so. And as most of you will have seen in your flight records, that allows you to get your totals for your leg and for the flight as a whole. There's one thing we can do down here as another example of a calculated field. Let's put in our average fuel burn per hour. So we'll select calculated field. Control name will be fuel burn pH. You'll see that I've put in some different characters for the name and the label, again, because we cannot have special characters in the control name. And we'll say that I want to look at my total fuel burn, which is a calculated field here that is totaling the calculated field per leg. So our takeoff fuel is 900, our landing is 600. That will give us 300 kilos of fuel burn. If we have 4 legs with 300 kilos each, that will give us 1200 here. So I want to say total fuel burn divided by total flight time in decimals. So that's condition A and B. A divided by B, it's going to be a number, and I can insert that. Our field is now there. If we go to a flight record, and I'm going to edit this. Remember that viewing a form does not refresh the calculated fields, only editing it does. And there's our average fuel burn per hour. So again, all that's doing is taking our fuel burn and dividing it by our block time. Or sorry, flight time. Calculated custom fields are also used in the timesheet setup. There are some other fields here that are not available anywhere else, such as shift type, duty, flight duty period. These are specific to this and cannot be added anywhere else. They can be enabled or disabled here by selecting display in summary and display in editor. There are some other options, but they're slightly outside the scope of this webinar, so we'll come back to those. You can ask us if you need help with those. We have some additional custom fields, namely the prior sleep-wake model. add that, which shows up like this. And that's for your fatigue risk management. Recency, which allows you to update recencies that have been defined as being able to be updated here. So I could say that the first aid recency can be updated directly from the timesheets. And I want to, none of these are actually very good options, but let's put in first aid anyway. I'll make that, and that, and that. Number of columns is 1. And those will show up on the particular person's profile. And then finally, tasks, mainly suited for AMEs, technicians, where they can select which aircraft they are working on, when they started and stopped, scheduled or unscheduled maintenance, and that will give them the number of hours they've worked on per aircraft. All of the other custom fields are also available here, as you saw earlier, and they can be used to customize your timesheets to record any details you want, and that can then be reported on from the global reports. Forms, as we've seen, entirely customizable, entirely custom built. Scheduling, under each task type, you can record additional information using the custom field builder at the bottom. That will show up as an additional tab when you schedule a task. Finally, and perhaps the most critical, is here under safety custom fields. So all of this, all of these tabs can be custom built to record details that you wish. Again, these can be drawn out. Text fields like this one can be drawn out using using global reporting, but it is much more difficult to categorize information in a text field than it is in a drop-down list or a checkbox list or a radio button. Speaking of radio buttons and checkbox lists, I'd like to show you an additional example of custom formatting, which we did cover in our safety setup webinar. I have here checkbox and a radio button list, which is determining what type of event this was in our flight details tab. Did it result in injury or damage? So these custom fields are used here in safety options for our flight report. Let's look at this AirProx one, near collision. We have display options exactly the same as we saw in the custom field builder itself, to say that this tab, near collision, will only show when AirProx is ticked on the flight details tab, and our formula is A. So you could have a tab that only shows when near collision or when AirProx and there was injury or damage down here. To do that, we would go add condition. Does this occurrence result in injury or damage? Yes. A and B means this tab will only show if AirProx is ticked and if the yes button is selected when it's did this occurrence result in injury or damage. Otherwise, if it's anything else, it will not show. So that's another example of how you can use custom fields to streamline your reports by adding more information to them. That's about it for this webinar. I hope it's been useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to send us a mail at help@cairnaviation.com, and we'll be very happy to assist you. Have a good day, and bye-bye.